Hi, everyone. I'm John Lincoln from Encore Tours, and I'm honored today to be joined by one of our clients and friends, JD Frizzell, the Director of Fine Arts and Vocal Music at Briarcrest Christian School outside Memphis, Tennessee. JD, it's good to see you. Hope you and your family are doing well and staying safe, and thanks so much for joining us.
Yeah, thanks, John. Absolutely. We're big fans of Encore and ACIS at Briarcrest, and we've traveled with you all multiple times. And we're happy to help here during this very strange time for education and everybody else. So thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. So I wanted to talk to you today about a somewhat controversial subject that's been getting a lot of attention in the choral world these days, and that's virtual choirs. For those of you who don't know, JD has an amazing a cappella group at Briarcrest called One Voice. The ensemble recently put together a virtual choir video, which JD posted on the I'm a Choir Director Facebook group, along with a step-by-step how-to guide. And last time I checked, JD, I think it had almost 21,000 views. So I'd like to start just by asking you for your general thoughts on virtual choirs, since, as you know, a lot of directors have some strong feelings one way or the other.
Sure. So, I mean, the first thing that I said when I posted this, and I think I made a post on my own Facebook page earlier, is I said, okay, we're going to do this project, but mainly because I want to learn what it takes, and I want to make a guide for realistic expectations for choir directors, because I think a lot of administrators are seeing other schools doing these, and they tell their choir director, hey, like, you need to do one of those for our choir. And of course they don't realize like how much work it is. So I wanted to know firsthand what it would take to make one, and B, I wanted to know how I could help other people navigate that. Half of the guide that I ended up making about this is basically a cautionary tale that says, hey, if you don't have 20 hours to spend minimum on this, you should just stop now, you know? That was the goal. That was how we started with it. And of course, like choir directors, like everybody else, we're trying to create something interesting and give our students something to do during this time. I mean, they're busy with math. I mean, we jumped straight in at our school. We have a one-to-one laptop program, so all the kids already had their laptops, and we didn't miss a single day of school. So we jumped right back into daily classes and through online video instruction. And so the kids are really busy. They have tons of work in their classes and they're moving forward, but they need something that's fun and a break. I mean, the same thing that choir and band provides, orchestra, the music classes at any school provide, this artistic outlet that's sort of a break in the day from everything else. And so, how do we do that in this virtual environment where we can't actually get together and make music? And this was the struggle that I was facing, that everybody else is too. So I said to One Voice and a few of my colleagues that worked with me on this, I said, all right, we have to establish some ground rules on this, because the first virtual choir videos I saw coming out like one day into quarantine were they sounded amazing, and I was like, how did they do that this fast? And then I saw, oh yeah, the audio was already pre-recorded. They'd already gone into a studio before the quarantine, and they had tracked it for an album or a video or whatever, and then they just like filmed themselves lip syncing to the video on their cell phones, and then pieced it together with video editing software. That's totally fine. And if you already have musical material, that's easy fodder for creating something new when you have to be socially distanced. But most people don't have that. Most people have their kids in remote locations, and everyone has a device of some kind, but not everybody has like a high-end laptop. Not everybody has the latest iPhone 12 XS whatever thing. And so what can most people realistically create? And that was what we set out to do. You can only use a cell phone to film. That was the ground rule. And all the audio and the video had to come from the cell phone. You couldn't use some kind of a preamp. input, with a nice microphone or anything. You had to use the cell phone audio and the cell phone video. So we started, we did this, and we actually learned a lot from making that first video. And we made another one. We just released it last night. It's a cover of Hallelujah, and it was one that we had planned on going into the studio to record, but we couldn't. So we decided to do this instead. And so that way, then we started through the process, and it's I was editing the audio myself. I was editing it in a program called Melodyne, and without getting too technical, I have pretty good skills at this, and it was still really hard for me. And so I ended up reaching out to a colleague to help me across the finish line, who does this for a living. So I think the big first piece of advice that I would tell everybody, whether you're a teacher or administrator, and if you are an administrator and you're watching this, or maybe your teacher has sent this to you to watch, please know that most choir directors and band directors do not have the skills or the tools to make one of these virtual videos. These are not products of music education. These are products of music technology. And so that's the big divide that needs to be established from the very beginning. Music can be created live with choral directors and band directors. That's our expertise. But these videos are created by audio and video producers because that's their expertise. So most of the videos that you see have been produced with professionals at some level. At some point in the post-production, professionals have been involved. And that was the case with ours too. We planned for this. We moved some money that we had for some other live projects that we couldn't do because we weren't together in person, and we shifted them towards this. And so that was my big piece of advice after I said, hey, if I had a hard time doing this, and I know how to use these tools, like I know how to use, edit audio and mix audio, and I know how to use video editing software and piece together the video, but I realized just how much time it was going to take me, and I have a 3-year-old, and so all the parents out there know what I'm talking about. It's one thing to do your job well when you're at work, but it's another thing to do it well when you're at home with children running around and having to take care of them too. So I was like pulling my hair out. I was trying to do this edit, and it was just like, it was just going to take more time than I had. So my big suggestion was, for most people, if your admins or your program, your students, your parents really want to make one of these videos, and you don't have extensive experience with audio and video production, you need to hire a professional to do it. And a lot of people will say, like, well, I mean, that costs money and whatever. Okay, well, like for us, for example, like we had a lot of sheet music that we didn't end up buying because we didn't have our final concert. We didn't have programs to print. I mean, there are a number of expenses that were probably already budgeted for that you could talk your choir booster board or your administrators at school or whatever into shifting those funds over into these virtual choir videos. So I think I ended up figuring out that you either need somewhere between 20 and 40 hours of dedicated time to get the most simple version of one of these videos produced. That's not like filming time, that's just post-production time. Or you need somewhere between like $300 and $600 to pay professionals to help you do it. There's everything from websites. I think it's called virtualchoir.com or something like that. And I think they charge $15 or $20 a singer. And people were like, that's outrageous. That's so expensive. Actually, that's a pretty good deal. I don't know anything about the work of that website, but that was one of the ones that was being thrown around was the virtualchoir.com. And then, in my article, I recommend the people that we have used for our videos as well, who are super familiar with doing it. But if you are going to do it on your own, definitely check out my guide. I'm sure that John, I'm sure you guys can link that so people can see it. I did work with our video and audio team to make a best practices, like step by step, here's what you need to do. And I did it, I walked through it myself so that I understood it from my end. And it is doable. I mean, if you have this software, and I put a number of free software programs as well for both video and audio production. If you have these, or you can get these, and you have the time and the bandwidth to learn, then by all means go for it. If time is what you have and money is what you don't have, then use the free tools that I've suggested on the article, and go for it. Just make sure that you're very patient with yourself. Make sure you follow the steps very, very closely. Don't skip any of them. They're all super important. And have patience, because it's going to take way more time than you think it will. The final product can be really worthwhile, but it's going to take some time.
Yes, I mean, those are a lot of great points, because I feel like, a lot of the discussion you see going back and forth, and the sort of the controversy about it is just this maybe perception that some people who aren't maybe musicians themselves, administrators, that this is just an easy thing to do. Like, oh, let's do this. It's great. It looks cool. And just having that realistic idea of, what this really takes to have it come off well. Maybe you just, again, I don't want to get into the nuts and bolts of it, because we have your guide that we will link to and people can look at that. But maybe just give folks an idea of, if they're trying to think to themselves, do I have the knowledge to do this on my own? What sort of level of comfort and expertise, with the technology do people need? And maybe how many people should they expect to be involved? Like your team that put this together, how many people were involved in this project?
So it was just me doing the production part, like getting the plan in place for the students, and then just, leading them through filming themselves. And in the post-production process, I had an audio person, Joe Clark, and a video person, Andrew Berkowitz. And so, they helped me put the guide together. You don't need a ton of people. You just need somebody that's familiar with making these. I mean, it is a totally different thing that no choir teacher, band teacher, whatever, has been trained to do, unless they have had separate training, in video and audio production. So it requires a fairly high level of skill, especially to get the audio to sound the way that people have been hearing the audio of some of these virtual choirs. It's a substantial amount of post-production, and I likened it to this. So how most choir directors spend days, weeks, maybe even months preparing the intricate details of a piece of music. They make sure that the onsets are together, the vowels are aligned, the attacks are good and aligned, the cutoffs are together. It's balanced and blended, and sounds in tune, and all these other things. All of those elements basically have to be crafted to a large degree in post-production. So all of those hours that are spent sort of massaging the sound into the final product live have to be shifted into post-production. That's a lot. So that when I explain it that way, a lot of people go, oh, okay, that makes sense. So the lion's share of that work is now taken from the choir director, who does that in real life, to the post-production person.
Right. So obviously nothing can replicate being together in person and rehearsing and performing together, but maybe just talk a little bit about what you felt the students got out of this, the benefit to them with this kind of project, how you see that.
Sure. So, I mean, one of the things that it did for them is it made them practice and sing. They couldn't just sit in their bedroom, laying down in their PJs, and get this video filmed. They had to like shower and get dressed in real clothes, and you know be ready for being seen by a lot of people. And then they had to practice their music a lot so that they had it memorized, so that they could sing it really well with expression and emotion, and artistry and good technique. And that's a lot. If I were doing this, I mean, One Voice, they are used to singing at a pretty high level, and we learn a new piece every week. So they're used to learning quickly and taking something to like final product status really fast. Um, a lot of students, including other classes that I would teach, I would take more steps to make sure that the music is ready. So I would break it down into smaller chunks, and we've been doing this actually for our choir classes. They sing, a 16 bar excerpt of a piece, then they send it in, and we listen to it. And if needed, we give them feedback on it. So building that up step by step, I think is really important. It's a way that they can still sing and make music, even though they're on their own, and there's sort of an impetus to do it well. Otherwise, why put forth too much effort to make something that's exceptional if no one's going to hear it, right? There's just not a very big incentive to do it. And so the knowledge that this video is going to be out there and seen by a lot of people, maybe even thousands of people, that's enough to make students go, okay, I'm going to do this really well.
Sure. And this is getting a little bit off the topic of virtual choirs, but just looking ahead to the rest of this school year, I know, here in Massachusetts, like many states, school has been canceled now for the rest of the year. I assume it's similar situation in
Yep.
Tennessee. What are you planning to, is this part of sort of your plan for the rest of the year to do some of these videos to keep the students engaged? What are you doing? I know that there's a lot of folks now, states that recently canceled school for the rest of the year. Just a lot of directors saying how sad it is, and they're thinking about their seniors and all these end of the year concerts and events that aren't going to happen. So just maybe your thoughts on what you're doing, your plans for the rest of the year with your students.
Sure. So in the South, we finished school pretty early. So like at our school, I think we only have 3 weeks left until we're done. And because we didn't have to use any snow days or anything like that, we're ready to go. So for us, it's a little bit different. We have been using these virtual choir videos as a way to give them projects, right? Musical projects to work on. And then you basically have a lot of the elements that you would normally have in a choir classroom, of creating a new piece of music. And then the last week, you focus on the launch. You focus on social media promotion, and teaching students to do that really well. Which of course they're pretty familiar with social media, but they enjoy that part too. I involve my students in that element as well, how to promote it and how to run a social media account well to get a lot of people watching. So that's a suggestion that I would have if somebody really needs something to inspire their students to finish the year strong. Find a piece of music that hopefully they've sung before. Those work the best. If you have to learn something new, it's really hard. It adds a whole nother element to the process. You can do it, but then you have to add the teaching the notes and rhythms part on the front end. For that, I highly, highly, highly recommend using sung practice tracks, and those are tremendously helpful. You can either make them yourself or use a service like choraltracks.com is who we use. It's Matt Curtis. He used to be in Chanticleer, and he makes, I don't know how many hundreds of thousands of practice tracks Matt has on that site. But he's doing a COVID-19 special, I know. And so we hopped right on that. Like for all the pieces that we were learning from my choir, I was like, hey, Matt, this is awesome. We need these pieces. And he's like, all right, I'll get them to you. And he did. And that was tremendously helpful. So if you're struggling with just trying to facilitate the learning of new music, highly suggest using something like that for sung practice tracks, because your singers are used to, yes, you do sight reading and everything else with them, but when you're teaching them new music, even if they do sight read well, they're used to having that reinforcement from you singing with them at some level. And so they need that again. So I highly suggest using the sung practice tracks for a new piece of music. And then you can use this whole process to finish your year strong. I would not try to do multiple videos. I would do one, and then you can fit it in a budget too. Then you can make sure that it's done really well and have professionals help you, so that the finished product is something that all the students and the parents, the stakeholders are really proud of, and your principals and your school share it on their social media, and everybody just loves the final product. I would hate to what I've seen a few colleagues, they have spent a ton of time preparing one of these projects, and then they didn't plan for anyone to help them with the post-production, and they make it 80% of the way, and they spend hundreds of hours, literally hundreds, um, on the production part themselves, and then it ends up sounding pretty bad, and they're really disappointed, because there are things that they didn't do on the front end that would have helped them a lot. I mean, one of them is, even if you don't have everybody align their audio to a click track, which is one of the things that I talk about in the guide, and then do a visual clap on a downbeat before the music starts, you'll spend a lot of hours just trying to line up everybody's tracks and videos together. Um, so, a lot of things that can add up in the end if you don't, just follow sort of like best practices for this. But I see this as a way for um, choir programs to facilitate a lot of the elements of normal instruction and have something for the end of the year that everybody can be really proud of, really get excited about, galvanize your program together. And that's what we're doing too. I mean, I did it with One Voice as a testing ground, and now we don't have our big end of the year pops concert, and so I'm we're doing we do this one piece at the end of every year, and we have like all the seniors step out in front, and they get honored in that way. So we're making a video of that song with our choir, and the seniors are going to be featured in that video. So it's a nice way to pay tribute to them, and sort of make up for the fact that we're not going to have this this tradition and this end of the year celebration. So almost all of the elements except physically being together can be satisfied by one of these projects.
Awesome, thank you. So just branching off topic a little bit, have you started looking ahead to the fall? Has the administrators started looking ahead to the fall, what that's going to look like? I know there's so much uncertainty right now. We're all hopeful that things will be back open and you'll be back together, but are there any contingency plans, or have you started discussing what your program might look like when school comes back in the fall?
I mean, our school has a contingency plan for the fall. I mean, we a lot of schools are looking at um, continuing some kind of online instruction or some kind of hybrid model. I was reading about that this morning in Italy. They're talking about doing, a hybrid model of some at home and some, in-person classes. People are talking about, having smaller class sizes, students more spread apart, alternating, A and B days of, one half of the students come one day, half the students come another day. Um, there are obviously challenges with all of those things. I mean, the first one that comes to mind with any of this is, what about parents who are working? Like if your kid is home on an off day, what do you do? I mean, it's the same problem now that essential workers are having. Where do their kids go? So yes, I mean, we've started sort of discussing strategies to use. Um, and I've seen a lot of my choir director colleagues post about, like, I don't know what would the fall look like if we do go back and this is still a big problem. How can we have a choir of 50 people in one room together? And I think the answer is that no one really knows right now. Everyone's conjecturing, and I think it's good to come up with strategies. And I think a lot of the things that we have ended up using that have been successful during this time can be implemented during that time as well. And I would not be surprised if there was some kind of hybrid model that most schools around the world are going to go to in the fall, to ensure the safety of the students, but also to instruct them to the best level possible. And I know that, like, for arts education specifically, um, this doesn't work very well. you know all the things that I've said about how we've done the virtual choir videos, and how this can do some things for us. It can facilitate some of the skill building that we want and some of the creativity that we want. It's nowhere close to being a substitute for real life in-person music making, and I think that is what strikes me more than anything else, is I'm reminded, and I think everyone else is reminded, of how important the human element is for music making, and why things like choir and band and orchestra are so special, and why things like, travel, like why we travel with you all. We go to, luckily we went to Italy last spring with Encore, and those memories are special, not just because Italy is beautiful and special, but it is, but it's special because we all went there together. And I think that it's important that choir directors and administrators remember, as we approach maybe future times having to deal with this, that the answer is not going to be moving to this reality for us. The answer is going to be finding ways to create a patchwork, while we find, a cure and a vaccine and everything else, so that we can be back together again. I mean, I think ultimately that's where we want to be. And I think it's really important that all music educators, and I know NAFME, ACDA, they've already started sort of advocating for this, that now's not the time to cut music teachers. Now's not the time to cut music programs, or think, well, we did this online choir thing once, so we could do this full time, and we wouldn't even have to have choir anymore at school. I mean, that's absolutely not what any of us who are trying to come up with these are basically just temporary solutions. And by no means do I or anybody else that are making these kind of virtual choir videos, or doing anything else with technology to sort of bridge the gap that we have right now between ourselves. In no way do any of us want this to become the new reality, but we're trying to make the best of what we have. And I'm a problem solver, and I'm always looking for ways to give students opportunities to shine in whatever the circumstances are. So in this case, we can't be together. We had our full 20-something stop tour plan for One Voice this spring. That whole thing was canceled, the whole thing. And, that was gut-wrenching for us. But so immediately I started thinking, well, what can we do? What can we do to approximate any part of that experience of sharing this music with other people? And that's why we ended up settling on making a video.
Well, thank you again, JD. We really appreciate your taking this time to be with us today. Obviously, this situation has affected all of us. At Encore, we've had a lot of groups who have postponed their travel plans. They can't do these trips right now. We're all looking forward to working with them in the future, but for the time being, we're trying to come up with ways that we can continue to support music education and music educators and provide resources that are going to be helpful and useful to folks. And I really think your discussion with us today about virtual choirs and the guide that you put out is really going to be useful to a lot of people. And we appreciate your being able to talk with us more about that today. So thank you.
Absolutely, John. Thanks for having me.